Hello students, Michael Sanchez, violin teacher here. Hope you guys are having a good evening. Today we're going to be working on the D major scale, followed by a very good song that I've chosen to work on today, the Marche by Bach. So hopefully you guys have done D major before, 2 octaves. So basically we're going to be shifting up in the 3rd position. So for those of you guys that are relatively new to this concept, basically on the D, which normally we play with a 3rd finger, we're going to be putting down instead a 1st finger. I'll go ahead and circle where that's at. So this normally is a 3, but in this case it's going to be a 1. And then that's kind of how we work our way up the scale. And then we go to the E string. And then finally the 4th finger, which is D. So in the key of D, since we have 2 sharps, F and C sharp, we're going to be playing a high 3rd finger on the A string, which is F sharp, and then a high 3rd finger on the E string, which is C sharp. All right, let's play through it together. So I want you guys to use lots of bow. Make sure you get to the tip, and try to make sure your bow grip's relaxed, bending the wrist, going up bow. Like that. A couple things. Just make sure that you guys are using your index finger as much as possible. So for those of you guys that haven't heard me talk much about index, basically the most important finger you use in the right hand to really guide the bow. So if you're not using the index finger, you're probably using a different muscle to guide the bow, which is incorrect. So definitely want to make sure you guys are using the front of the hand, and everything else should be relaxed as you're trying to transition. All right, well, hopefully that's a good warm-up for you guys. And then let's get right into the sheet music, which is the Marche by Bach. So I'm going to go ahead and play through it, just the beginning, so you guys can hear what it sounds like. So make sure I can get it all on the screen here. All right, so here's the Bach Marche. So I'll just stop there so we have just kind of work on the beginning part. Okay, so yeah, this is definitely a good piece for you guys that have been playing around this level. It's all in 1st position to start, but we have some maybe things that you haven't really focused on before with your playing. So the key signature is D, just like we did the scale. So it's going to be high 2 on A string and D string, so make sure you guys are playing C sharp. That C sharp I just highlighted should be touching the D. Make sure you guys are making sure that those are nice and tight. On the E string, we actually have G natural, which is low 2 on the E string, which is touching the 1st finger. So those are half steps. It's always good to know where your half steps are when you play the violin. It's really important. And then going down the scale, those are touching. Right here we have a accidental G sharp, and basically what that is normally you would play G natural because of the key signature, but in this case you're actually going to do it as a high 3rd finger, which is actually right next to the next note on the next string. So once you get this G sharp in tune, it should help you to find the next note, even though it's on a different string. So for those of you guys that are here right now in the class, you guys can see this. So we have high 3 on the D string. I'm going to use that finger to help me know where the 4 is on the A string. So I'm just going to put my 4 down and I'm right there. So the B, the G sharp to the E should be easier because of leaving fingers down. All right, then we have a C sharp coming down the scale, should be touching the D. And then we have what's called a trill right here. So raise your hand if you guys have done a trill before. All right. So a trill is basically where you move your fingers as fast as you can between the note that you're trilling and the note above the note you're trilling in the scale. So in this case, it would be a B and a C sharp, which is the next note of the scale, that you would trill. And basically you're going to go back and forth between these two notes as fast as you can to satisfy the trill. And you do it as long as the rhythm states. So in this case, it would be a dotted quarter note, which is 1.5 beats. You would do a trill. So that measure would be. And the grace note that is right before the trill, basically what that does, it actually implies that instead of starting on the B for the trill, you're actually starting on the C sharp instead. So in this case, you're not going to be doing B to C sharp as you normally would with a trill. You're actually going to be doing a C sharp first, then the B. So it's just a way of starting on the top note instead of the bottom note. Let me play it again. Now, if you guys are having trouble counting this measure, what I would suggest is subdividing eighth notes, which basically means instead of counting simply as 1, 2, 3, 4, as you normally do when you have quarter notes in a measure, we're going to actually double all the values. So instead of a quarter note being 1, we're going to have a quarter note be 2, and then an eighth note would be 1. So this is an eighth note right here. We're going to consider that one beat, one clap. And then this is also 1 here. And then this note would actually be a 3. Normally it would be 1.5. 1.5 times 2 is 3. That makes it a lot easier to count the dotted quarter note. And that's going to happen twice. And as you can see, because normally there's 4 beats in a measure, we're doubling everything, so it should be double as well. 4 times 2 is 8. So 3 plus 1 plus 3 plus 1 equals 8. So that's basically the counting that I would consider and think about in that measure. Instead of counting 1.5, half, 1.5, half, that's pretty tough to count. You're just doubling it. So when you get there, I'll start a measure before, and so you can kind of hear how that's counted. It's going to go 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, right there. And if I back up a little bit, this quarter note slurred into an eighth note is technically called a tie, which a tie, when you slur 2 of the same notes, it's basically just combined together. So instead of a quarter note, being slurred to an eighth note, which, would be a certain sound, a quarter note slurred into the same note is basically the same thing as a dotted quarter note. So let me just make sure you guys understand this. I'll kind of do it off the side. So a quarter note that's tied into an eighth note, like this, is the same thing as a dotted quarter note by itself. Like that, okay? So this right here, this tie, is the same thing as this dotted quarter note as far as the length. The reason why they do it that way is because then they can kind of organize those eighth notes that follow a little bit more in groups of 4, which is something that is basically just how you write music. You like to have eighth notes in groups of 2s and 4s. So you can see here this is in a group of 4, these eighth notes. That's kind of the purpose. Raise your hand if that makes sense. Hopefully you guys kind of get why they do ties there instead of dotted quarter notes. Good. Okay, now when you guys get to the next part, which is the third line, I suggest maybe coming back to counting quarter notes because it's a lot simpler with a rhythm. So, you could count it as 1, 1, 1, 2, like that. All right, let me play through the second part here so you guys can hear how it sounds. Good, an optional last note high there. Okay, cool. So yeah, there's actually definitely some spots in here where students could definitely not be quite on in tune. So let me just point some of those out to you guys. When you guys are playing this beginning part on the E string, it's really easy to not have your knuckles high enough. So make sure that you guys are not dipping down when you're doing those E string notes. Very easy to do that. Make sure that the G sharp, which is an accidental, normally that would be a low 2 because of the key signature, but it's actually a high 2 in this scenario. So that should be touching the A that follows. One thing I didn't mention earlier is you have a lot of accents in here, so make sure you guys are emphasizing those notes by just kind of tugging your bow a little bit more to make them sound a little more emphasized. So instead of going kind of smooth, listen how it's accented. So that's kind of what you're going for there eventually. Okay, another G sharp here is indicated, so we got high 2 there. And then we have low 2 on the E string there. Excuse me a second, guys. I have to quick shut off my live chat here. Sorry. Happens sometimes. Okay, low 2 on the E string. And then that should be touching the first finger, F sharp. And then we have these two notes are touching. It's always good to know where your half steps are. And then we have low 2 on the A string to come up. That's also an accidental because the key signature is showing us C sharp. So that's an accidental there. Those are touching. These are touching. Steps. Always good to know where they're at. I would say students would miss this combination a lot from the G natural to the A. So that measure should sound like this. Followed by, and that is definitely a spot where students miss. Playing this low enough, this G natural, and then getting this B high enough. It's a very commonly missed interval because students get too low with their hand and kind of put too much force into the 4, which actually makes you not reach it. So one thing you guys could practice is just going between those two notes, between the G and the B. And then for those of you guys that are here, you guys can see how I'm just setting my fingers down. I'm not forcing it with my hand. That's actually what makes it harder to reach. So watch how I just drop my finger down and my angle's good. It's not like this. It's like this. Like that. Okay. And then we have C sharp. We have G natural. Should be touching the F sharp. Make sure you use 4th finger, not E. That would be cheating. Here it's okay to use open E because we're going into the E string. G natural. And then here I would suggest, because we did do a little bit of light 3rd position in the scale, I would suggest you guys try doing 3rd position at the end, which would mean instead of doing this as a 3, you would do this as a 1, and then that would put you in 3rd position to be able to reach this top note, which is a 4 in 3rd position. So it's going basically from A to D in 3rd. Here's my A. Here's my D. So the last two measures would be like that. Very good. Okay, so hopefully that's a good exercise for you guys to work on this week. I think it's a really nice piece that eventually will go faster, but for those of you guys that are around this level, I would say just the speed I played earlier would be fine. Maybe I could just play it just a little bit, a little faster all the way through for those of you guys that maybe are a little bit more advanced. So maybe I'll do that real quick. But yeah, it definitely sounds nice when it goes a little faster. Just like that. All right, so hopefully you guys will practice that this week. I'm going to hang out with the people that are here in the live class and answer any questions they might have. For those of you guys that are interested in joining these classes, you can sign up right on the site in the live webinar navigation tab there, and hope to see you guys in some of the classes in the future.